Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we are taking a look at the Northern Wind, and yes, the Warden did get some changes that do not help this build, but it's still a viable build and it still works out really well. I will tell you this, the uptime of Minor Maim is a lot less than what it was. You do not have 100% uptime of it now. It drops to about a 77% if you're lucky to get any higher than that. It's rare. So it's going to be anywhere between 60 and 70% uptime of Minor Maim. Alright, so let's get right into it. This time around, guys, we are going with the Breton for this build instead of the other races. And the reason I chose the Breton is the Breton gets extra spell resistance out the door, which is really good. You kind of need the extra spell resist to make this build kind of a little better. I'm not gonna lie, and that Breton just does that. As you can see, we do have a 909 magic recovery. You can get better if you want to do some tweaking to the build. It's up to you. But moving on down here, we do have Ebon Armory. You do not have to use Ebon Armor. In fact, Plague Doctors on this build is better. So next up, we have the Lady Mundustone for the extra spell and physical resist, and we are using Tri-Stat Food. As you can see, we do have Minor Heroism all the time, along with Major Prophecy all the time, because we need that high crit in order for this build to work really well. Moving on to the gear. So over here we're going to take a look at the potions and food real quick. We are using Longfin Pasty with melon sauce. It's one of the better foods you can get on the live servers. And then Tri-Stat potions. Honestly, the live ones, again, better. You get like 7k magic, a 7k stamina, and like a 9k health back. It's ridiculous. Now, moving on to the sets. As you guys can see, we are still sticking with the tried and true Ice Heart set, because this does offer a little bit of spell crit, but it's the 2-piece bonus that we want. Whenever you deal critical damage, you have a 20% chance to get a damage shield that absorbs 9,976 damage for 6 seconds while dealing ice damage to the enemies around you. This set can proc chilled. Your chilled effect is not gonna be guaranteed off of this set. I'm gonna tell you that now, but it does proc it on occasion, so it's kind of nice to have this set. The next set we're running is Shulks. Shulks gives us max health, spell damage, spell crit, and minor heroism. Again, with the nerf to crit, we lost some of our crit, so we're not at a 40% anymore. So your crit chance or crit uptime isn't going to be as much, but it still will crit enough to keep Ice Heart going. It's just, this is something that you can't time when it goes off. It just goes off. So you have to be using a lot of heavy attack still for the shield from the Ice Staff. The next set we're using is Ebon. Max health, 4% healing taken, and then increases your max health by 118 or 1,118 for up to 11 other members within 28 meters of you. It's a nice set, but it's not a necessary set or a necessity set for this build. You can get away with using Plague Doctors. So, and in this update with the nerf to Warhorn, Plague Doctors is technically overall, with the amount of health it gives you, better than Ebon. Ebon just offers everyone else a little extra health. And then moving on to the weapons, we are using dual Shulks Ice Staves. And on one bar we have Crusher, the other one we have a Frost Enchant to keep up Minor Maim. So remember that. You want to keep Minor Maim up, this is how you're going to do it. If you want to use Crusher here and Infused, or Weakening here, or Crusher here, Weakening here, you can do that. The problem is that your uptime of Minor Maim is a lot less, and it really hurts the build with that. So, how do we have the gear set up? We have Infused on the big pieces, Healthy on the smaller ones, with Sturdy. Since we are using an Ice Staff, we do get the blocking. It does cost Magicka, that's why our Magicka pool is so high. And then on the jewelry, we are using 2 spell damage. You can use 2 block cost reductions, but it won't make a big difference. Not big anymore, not like it used to. And then on top of that, we have a Infused with a magic recovery. Alright, so let me go ahead and show you guys what this thing looks like buffed up with its frost cloak and everything, so you guys can see for yourself the resistances. We go to 30k spell and 36 physical. If we weren't a Breton, we'd actually have a 26, 27k spell with a 26 physical, and it's good. This is really good because we're still at a 45% physical honor resistance on mitigation, and then over here we're almost at a 50. So we're at like 48.7 or 48.9. So it's overall really good. Now, moving on to the skills. So when it comes to skills, guys, make sure you get all of your class passives. It's really important, especially on tank builds, because you never know when you're going to need certain skills. Like in this case, I can use living vines as a heal for my group. I can also use nature's grass as a thing to pull my allies to me, kind of thing, and heal them, or move to my allies and heal them. It's just a kind of a nice group support kind of thing. And then all the ice skills, you will be using all of them. The thing is that because of the nerf to Arctic winds, we are using polar winds now, and polar winds is not as effective for this particular build type. It works on other tank builds, but it does not work for this one very well, and I'm not going to lie about it. So, make sure you get all the passives. On to these weapons passives, make sure you get all these, and there is a reason why I have a few of these unlocked up here, because some of these skills up here really help out, and we'll get to that. Armor passives, light armor top 3, medium armor top 2, bottom 1, and then on to heavy armor, all of them. World skills, soul magic, I always get these two. You can be a vampire with this build, but remember, you will take a lot of fire damage. So if you're going to play this build as that, be a dark elf. So that way you can mitigate the fire damage. Fighters guild, you just need fighters. Intimidating presence, mages guild, you're going to want to get inner light, persuasive will, and magic controller. You do not use any Psijic order ability, so there's no reason to get it. But if you do want to use a Psijic order ability, use time stop. And use the instant cast one, time freeze. This is a good AoE thing that you can use, and it will help lock enemies in. Plus, it'll give you the passive for concentrated barrier and deliberation, which are two really good things for mitigating damage. But this build already mitigates enough; you don't really need it. On to the Undaunted. You want to get Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. Since you are using an Ice Staff, you don't really need a ranged taunt, but it's still nice to have. And there's no reason to use Silver Leash with this build, because you do have Frozen Device, which is a pull, and you can pull enemies too. You can have a total of 3 of these up at one time, so you can kind of place them. And if you know instances really well and you know where mobs spawn, you can place it perfectly, so it'll bring all the mobs right to you. And then you got your ice, like, holding them in place, so it's a really good trade-off. Moving on to the racials. Make sure you get all your racial passives. Breton is not the best for this, guys. It is a good option. So, alchemy, medicinal use, and provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. I know a lot of people will say that Argonian would be better. It's not. Actually, the best race for this, and I hate to say it because it's going to sound horrible. It's going to sound kind of horrible. But the best race for this is the Nord. Unfortunately, because of their 6% damage reduction. Now, resource management wise, yes, Argonian's better, but other than that, you don't really need it because you do a lot of heavy attacking. So, going over the skills now on the bar, we are using Frozen Device. As I said, when you place this, it'll teleport enemies to you. It also applies frost damage, and it applies Major Maim for 4 seconds. This is what's so good about this skill, is you can apply Major Maim with it to targets in trash encounters, which is really good. And like I said, if you know the dungeon well enough, you know the mechanics, you know the ads placement and stuff, you can put down this, pull them to you, they have minor maim on them, or major maim, then you can apply minor maim. And this will reduce the incoming damage you take and your allies take. It's only 4 seconds, which is kind of a bad thing, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Next up, we have Gripping Shards. This is by far the best tool an ice tank can have, because it is an AoE, and because of the passive on the Winter's Embrace, Glacial Presence, which now only applies to 2 of their skills, it does have a chance of applying Chilled. It is a small chance, but it has the effect where it can apply Chilled quite often. Along with Ice Heart, along with your Wall of Elements, you can keep Chilled on enemies really well, and you can also immobilize them. So you can stack up enemies and lock them down, keep them CC'd, all kinds of stuff. This build is a CC build. It's great for it. Next up, the ability that ruined this build, and I hate to say it, but it's the switch over to Polar Winds. I know a lot of people like Polar Winds. I get it. It's a good heal for you. It's a good heal for your allies. But the problem is that it's not... It doesn't do anything to help you as a tank physically. It supports you as a tank, and it supports your group, well, one other person in your group. But other than that, it is completely, almost useless for a tank. It has no CC, it has no way to apply any chilled status effect, and it's just kind of like you're throwing it away. No offense, but it is. Our next ability on our bar is one of the greats, Shimmering Shield. This does a massive amount of damage absorption of 3 projectiles. It also gives you magicka back when it's hit, and it also grants you major heroism for 6 seconds, granting you 3 ultimate every 1.5. This is the Uber Shield. No offense, but it is. Next up, we do have Inner Light. Inner Light's a really kind of an interesting one to have on a tank build, I know. But you do need that high crit chance, so this gives you that. Plus, it gives you 8 or 7% max magicka while on this bar. Next up, we do have Aggressive Warhorn on the main bar. Usually, I run the Glacial or Northern Storm. But because of the way I had to change the build, I need to put Northern Storm on the back bar and keep Aggressive Warhorn on the front. But this gives your group max magicka, max stamina, and increases your critical damage by 15% for 9.5 seconds. So that does apply to you as well. So it does make your build a little bit more aggressive. On the back bar, we do have Blockade of Frost. This is going to give us our ice damage. It's going to help us chill, immobilize chilled enemies, all kinds of stuff. It's really powerful. Next, we have Elemental Drain. This is where we get most of our resource return and our Major Breach from. We do not have any way of applying Major Fracture unless you want to go Sword and Board. And if you do want to go Sword and Board with this build, it is viable. But at the same time, it can kind of hurt it. So this build is designed for Ice Staff. It is not designed for Sword and Board. But you can use the Sword and Board if you want to. And like I said, it's just not as effective for this setup. The next thing we have is Ice Fortress. This does Major Resolve, Major Ward, and it gives us minor protection. And you have to understand, minor protection only applies to you. The Major Ward, Major Resolve applies to your allies within 8 meters. So this is really good for your DPS, because it's going to increase their resistances, your Stam DPS, because they're going to be there right there with you. So they will get Major Ward, Major Resolve, which reduces their, or increases their physical and spell resist by 5,280, along with yours. And then it's going to give you minor protection, which is 8% damage reduction. The thing that's great about ice tanks is they have a lot of damage mitigation when it comes to like damage reduction. So they are the only class now that gets an 8% damage reduction in their defensive buffs. All the other classes have to use abilities or armor sets that give them it. The next ability in our bar is our one of our heals, actually. This is Lotus Blossom. Now this, whenever you deal a light attack or heavy attack, you heal yourself or somebody near you for light attacks, 1,478, and heavy attacks, 4,435. This lasts for 20 seconds. It also grants you major proficiency as well, and when we swap back and forth, the reason we have Inner Light on the front bar is at 7% max magicka. On the back bar, though, we do have Northern Storm to give us 8%. Next up, we do have Blue Betty. This is a magicka return. It also grants us major sorcery, increasing our spell damage. And anytime you cast this ability, it removes 1 negative effect. This is why it's really good for this tank in particular, is because you can remove negative effects. And then last but not least, the skill that made this build, the Northern Storm. This skill is an AoE CC, because it reduces the movement speed of enemies by 70% while they're in it for 8 seconds. This is one of the strongest CCs in the game now for movement speed. It also has a chance of applying Chilled, and if they're in your wall of elements, they will get immobilized. So it's a very powerful ability. It also grants you and nearby allies within 10 meters 30% major protection, reducing incoming damage by 30%, and while slotted, you get 8% max magicka. This is an and ultimate. And it's a really good one, so it's something you want to... I use this more than I use Warhorn. I'm not going to lie. So... Alright, now moving on to the CP here. We have 66 in Ironclad. This reduces direct damage taken by 22%. We have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing our damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. Both of these giving us 12% reduced damage in poison, disease, physical damage, flame, frost, shock, and magic damage. So this is overall like our main mitigation of damage. This reduces damage from damage over time effects, and this reduces damage from direct damage. So those two do stack with this, but with that 8% damage reduction applied to both of these, that is a 20% damage reduction. And if you are playing a Nord with their 6%, it does not get applied to this. It gets multiplied into that 20%. So you actually get, I think it's an extra 3 almost percent extra damage reduction. So it's kind of nice to use the Nord for this because of that. Moving on, we do have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of damage shields by 16.2%. Very good. Quick recovery to 19 points. This gives us a extra healing received by 5.2%. This is just overall to help us keep us alive. Polar Winds, you know, we had to trade one skill that gave us a heal and an AoE, and greater chance of keeping chilled up for a heal and a group support. So that heal for us is going to be good, but that's about it. The heal for the ally is going to be okay, but it's going to be dinky anyway. So, and then 2 on physical weapon or heavy armor focus to give us increased physical resistance by 209. We didn't really have any place to put those 2 extra points, and that was going to be the better option. Moving on to green, we have 56 in Warlord. This reduces break free by 20%. We have 23 into bashing focus. This reduces bash cost by 14%, and then 9 into sprinter, giving us a 6% sprint cost reduction. Overall, we get a good rounded amount of resource reduction, which saves us resources. 43 into Arcanus, this increases our magic recovery by 10%, and then 43 into Tenacity, this increases our magicka return on fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. Since we are wearing heavy armor, we get another 25. We get a 35% on our heavy attacks, and then a base of 30%, so it comes out to 65%. We have 56 into Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 20%. If you wanted to, you could take this up higher, but honestly, you don't need to. And then 40 into Tumbling. This reduces our dodge roll by 16%. With the 1 piece of medium armor, we go up to a 20% reduced dodge roll cost, which saves us a lot of stamina if we have to get out of something like really quickly or avoid something really quickly. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 into Bless. This increases healing done by 10%. This is good for Polar Wind. This is good for our Lotus Blossom to keep us alive. And then we have 56 in Elfborn. This increases critical damage and critical healing by 20%. Since we're using mostly magicka heals, this is really good for that. And it helps us with our damage. So, 43 in Elemental Expert. This increases our Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage. We do have a 6% increase in magic and frost damage for being a Warden. So that frost damage goes up to a 16%, which is really, really good. And then 7 into Spell Erosion. This gives us extra spell pen. Just it helps us while we're in a dungeon or a trial to do a little bit more damage. I know we're not damage dealers, but it helps when we do our AoEs and we're doing all of our ice stuff, because our total damage that we do applies to the group as well. So next up, 25 into physical weapon expert. It should be staff expert. Let me fix that. Sorry, I'm so used to just dropping the points here, but you're going to want this staff expert, so your light and heavy attacks are increased by 15%. 40 into Master at Arms. This increases your direct damage done by 16%. All your heavy attacks and light attacks with this build, because of Ice Staff being one shot, is direct damage. So this really helps with that. So these two together is a 30-something% increase in your light and heavy attack damage. Just letting you know. Then we have Retaliation, which whenever we block a heavy attack, your next light attack done within 7 seconds deals 30% extra additional damage. And usually when you block a heavy attack, you set the enemy off balance, so you're going to knock them to the ground. Unless it's a boss. Then we also have riposte or reposit. Whenever we block a melee attack, we have a 15% chance to deal damage back to the enemy. It can happen every 5 seconds. And then we put 56 in a thaumaturge. This increases our ice wall effects damage. So, or wall of elements damage. So it's a really good one. And it also works for the ultimate we have. So it doesn't work for the gripping shards because gripping shards is based off of max health. So, and it's strictly max health. It doesn't, even if you use spell something, increase your spell damage, which I'll show you real quick. So as you guys can see, I do have this, my Blue Betty. I'll go ahead and cast it. And I want you guys to see this real quick. So we have the Blue Betty up. This is our gripping shards. You can see it does 859 frost damage every 1 second for 12 seconds. When Betty Netch wears off, the damage on this will not change. Like I'll mouse over it. I'll run over here real quick because I'm going to run up on this platform. I want to show you something else. There's a reason why we have 32k health and not 35. So that went off. Now we'll go down here again, and you guys can see it's 933 frost damage. Did that change? Okay, well it stays the same. Like I said, it doesn't change anything. Now watch what happens when my health goes up. Now we're at 35k health, and gripping shards didn't go up again. I think the tooltip might be bugged. I don't know, but it should go up to about 1,000 damage because of it. So, like I said, overall it's a nice thing, and it works out really well. So, alright, so that is the Northern Wind build, guys. Now we're going to see this build in action. I'm going to go ahead and do this, just because a lot, and I've been getting asked this a lot. Why are you testing in normal? Why don't you test in veteran content? I do test in veteran. I test in both, but I do all my testing before I release my builds. Like the first week that the PTS is up, I'm testing builds. Most of the time, but most of these builds I've tested so many times in there that even with the minor changes that we got now, the uptime of like minor MAME was tested on a dummy, and testing it in a trial is a different situation. So now you do have to remember one thing about playing the Northern Wind build. This build is made for, you guessed it, heavy attacks, guys. Lots of heavy attacks. It is one of the downfalls of the build, but it is also one of the big upscales of the builds, because whenever you do a heavy attack, you taunt, and you get a minor shield with it. And the thing that's also nice about Ice Staff is there is no way of over-taunting, because the taunt isn't like the taunt for Sword and Board, where if you apply it too many times, the enemy just basically becomes immune to it. This does not happen with this one. So I'll show you guys while I'm attacking this guy here. Let me go ahead and get buffed up real quick. I just mainly need to keep this up. But as you guys can see, like, I can just keep this stuff going a lot, and I get damage shields, I get a lot of AoEs, I have a lot of like CC crowd control stuff, which comes in handy with the build. The problem with the build, and it's always been a problem, is managing your resources. Because of how much resources you use Magicka-wise, you're not blocking a whole lot, and if you do need to block, you're only blocking things like the Flame Whip there, and stuff like that. The other nice thing about this build is, like I said, you can use these to pull enemies to you, those portals, and it comes in really handy, again, because you can bring them in, you can start CCing them, all that kind of stuff. You just have to be really careful with this build and how it works. When we had the other morph, and I'm not going to lie, when we had the other morph of the Arctic Blast, it was a lot easier to maintain this build because Arctic Blast would heal you for you would be using it a lot. You'd be the uptime of it would be a lot more. With this one, I don't even like try to use Polar Winds because it's just a heal. And to me, that heal is not as effective as it once was Arctic Blast. So, but overall, this is a really fun build. It's a really good build. You just have to become accustomed to it, like I said. And once you get accustomed to it, this thing's really good, actually, because of how well it can maintain itself. Oops. And I have a habit of doing that with the ice thing that pulls enemies to you. So. And then if you really need it, you can just do this. And then you get that massive CC in there from the Northern Storm. There's a lot of stuff going on the screen, so it's giving me a little bit of lag, which is fine. Like I said, I really like Northern Storm. It's a really good CC, and it gives me 30% damage reduction, which is really good, and it also applies to my group. So it's overall, it's just a really good CC crowd control. And there we go, and that is the Northern Storm. That's how it works when you're actually using it and you're actually paying attention. I can solo these three guys, but it's like a 20-minute fight, and I don't want to torture you guys with that. But that is the Northern Wind, guys. I hope you guys like it. I love this build. It's one of my favorite Warden builds, like tank builds, besides Death's Wind, which I will be re-releasing this update. It's not as good as it once was. It's actually kind of lost some of its luster for me, but it still works, and it's really effective. So I will be bringing Death's Wind out probably on Saturday. I was hoping to have it out earlier than the week, but I had some issues with my computer yesterday, so I'm sorry. But yeah, if you guys like this build, like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me, or other videos or streams, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.